A dramatic change is expected in Cuba's highest office. For the first time in nearly 6 decades, the country will be ruled by someone not named Castro. Miguel Diaz-Canel, a Communist Party loyalist, has been selected as the only candidate to succeed Raul Castro as president. The Castro family has had a firm grip on Cuba since 1959, when Fidel Castro seized power following a revolution. His brother Raul became president in 2006. This change in command is seen as a way to ensure the government they created holds power long into the future. Diaz-Canel is expected to take office Thursday. And let's discuss this further with Robert Hewish. He is an associate professor at Dalhousie University's International Development Studies Department and joins us from Halifax. Good to have you with us. What do we know about Castro's successor, sir?
Well, Mr. Miguel Diaz-Canel, he is a longtime protege of Raul Castro and before that, Fidel Castro. He is one of the few younger leaders that the old guard in the Cuban Revolution actually kept around to succeed power to. One of the things within the Cuban Revolution is that most of the original revolutionaries from the 1950s, they're no longer spring chickens. They have either retired or they have deprived us of their company. And Mr. Canel Diaz is one of the first to show a new generation of leadership in Cuba.
And this is quite significant, Robert, is it not? He doesn't have that guerrilla background, if you will. What does this mean for relations, mainly with Canada? And we can talk about other countries as well. Do you think we'll see a significant turn of events?
Right. So this isn't the first time in Cuba's history where the president has not been a guerrilla fighter. There was another president in the early stages of the Cuban Revolution while Fidel Castro was prime minister. There was a citizen who was a president between 1959 and 1976. And now that you have Mr. Diaz-Canel taking on the role of president, let's not forget that you've also got Raul Castro, who will continue to be the head of the Communist Party. So what it means for anything to do with Canada and diplomatic relations is that there's not going to be a large change in governance in Cuba. It's going to be business as usual. The one thing that we'll see different is that this is the first time between Cuba and Canada since the 1970s where the head of state in Cuba has not personally known members of the Trudeau family to the way that they knew the Castros.
And is that significant, or is it just going to be business as usual? And I think you're going to say it's business as usual, given the fact that the Trudeau family has a long history with the Castros.
Yeah, I mean, Pierre Trudeau took a very bold move in the 1970s to be the first G7 leader to visit Cuba when there was a lot of hostility about Cuba's actions in the war in Angola against the apartheid regime in South Africa. Since then, they've bonded with very, very personal relationships between the families. Now, what we're going to see is, will that relationship still maintain if Cuba faces more diplomatic isolation from the United States? Cuba's had a long relationship with Venezuela, hostile relationship with the United States, but now you see that Cuba is still going to be needing international business partners to make their economy function, and this is where Canada should certainly play a role.
I'm curious to know what you think, Robert, about the recent unidentified illness suffered by some Canadian diplomats, how that may affect the future relationship with Cuba. Some say that it won't affect the relationship between the two countries. Others say it was a stupid move to have Canada pull some families, the relatives, out of Cuba, given that mystery that's unfolded there.
I think it's a bit ridiculous to try to compare the embassy in Havana as having the same security level now as that of the embassy in Kabul. We've got almost 1 million Canadians a year that go down to Cuba for tourism purposes, and we have a lot of connections, business and political connections with Cuba. A lot of Cubans actually live in Canada, so there's a huge exile community here. So there's a lot of relationships there, and with that, to see the withdrawal of family members from the Canadian embassy, that will send a symbolic message to the Cuban government to say, wait a minute, whose side are you on, really? Are you following what the U.S. embassy has done, or is this really an independent move on part of Canada for health and safety reasons? Cuba's been very open, very transparent with all the investigations leading into these inquiries about sonic attacks. So I'm sure that Cuba will be willing to continue that relationship, a good working relationship with Canada. provided that Canada is willing to work with the new political regime emerging in Cuba today.
All right, that's what we'll have to watch out for. We're going to have to leave it there. Robert Hewish, Associate Professor at Dalhousie University's International Development Studies Department. Thank you for this.
Thank you.